The first thing I remember about that morning wasn't the betrayal. It was the smell of burnt coffee. It lingered in the air like something forgotten, bitter, sharp, and faintly humiliating. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes long after you've left the room. I stood in the break room of the 27th floor, staring at the coffee machine as it sputtered its last breath, dark liquid dripping unevenly into a cracked ceramic mug someone had abandoned hours ago. That should have been my first warning, because that day, everything that was supposed to go right went wrong. And the worst part, I didn't see it coming. I had been working at Harrington and Company for 6 years. 6 long, exhausting, soul-draining years. The kind where you sacrifice weekends, skip birthdays, forget what sunlight feels like. The kind where your entire identity slowly becomes your job title. Senior Project Analyst. It wasn't glamorous, but it was supposed to be a stepping stone. Because everyone, literally everyone, knew I was next in line for promotion. Everyone except the one person who mattered. Big day, huh? I turned around to see Mark Reynolds leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, that familiar half-smirk glued to his face. Mark, the guy who somehow managed to look relaxed even in a high-pressure corporate environment. Perfect hair, perfectly tailored suits, perfectly timed jokes and meetings. The kind of person upper management loved. The kind of person you didn't trust. Yeah, I replied, forcing a smile. Big day. He stepped into the room, grabbing a fresh cup and casually rinsing it under the sink. You nervous? I shrugged. Not really. I've done the work. Mark chuckled under his breath. That's what I like about you. Always so confident. There was something in his tone I didn't like. Something almost amused. But I brushed it off. Because at that moment, I still believed this was my day. The conference room was already filling up when I walked in. Glass walls, polished oak table, the faint hum of the city below filtering through the windows. This room had always felt intimidating. Today, it felt like a stage, and I was about to perform the final act of a 6-year journey. At the head of the table sat Richard Harrington, the CEO, a man whose approval could make or break careers. Next to him, HR, and then Mark, already seated, already smiling, already comfortable. That was the second warning. Let's begin, Richard said, his voice calm but commanding. My presentation went flawlessly. Every slide, every statistic, every projection. I had spent months preparing for this moment. I spoke about growth strategies, market expansion, risk mitigation, everything the company needed for the next phase. I didn't just present a plan. I presented the future. And when I finished, there was silence, followed by nods, impressed nods, satisfied nods. Richard leaned back slightly, steepling his fingers. Very thorough, he said. Relief washed over me. This was it. This was the moment everything paid off. Mark, Richard said, turning slightly. Would you like to add anything? My heart paused. Add? Add what? Mark hadn't been involved in this project. Not really. He stood up slowly, adjusting his cufflinks. Just a few thoughts, he said casually. And then he started speaking. At first, I didn't understand what was happening, because what he was saying sounded familiar, too familiar. Every idea, every strategy, every key point. It was mine, all of it, reworded, repackaged, delivered with confidence, like he owned it, like he had built it, like I didn't exist. My chest tightened. I looked around the room. No one reacted. No one questioned it, because why would they? Mark was charismatic, confident, convincing, and I was just the one who spoke first. And that's why I believe this approach positions us perfectly for a Q4 expansion, Mark concluded, flashing a polite smile. Silence again. But this time it felt different. Heavier, decisive. Richard nodded slowly. Excellent insights. Insights. I felt something crack inside me. I tried to speak, but my voice came out weaker than I expected. That's actually part of my... Richard raised a hand gently. We've heard your presentation, he said. Thank you. Thank you. That was it. That was all I got. The decision didn't come immediately. Of course not. They made us wait. Corporate theatrics. But deep down, I already knew. When the email finally arrived, it was short, cold, final. After careful consideration, we are pleased to announce that Mark Reynolds will be stepping into the role of Director of Strategic Operations. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. The office felt different after that. Quieter, colder, or maybe it was just me. People avoided eye contact. Some gave awkward smiles. Others pretended nothing had happened. But the truth was clear. I had been replaced. No, I had been erased. You okay? I looked up to see Mark standing at my desk. Of course he was. He had won. Yeah, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Why wouldn't I be? He tilted his head slightly. I know this must be tough. Tough. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because something inside me had shifted. Something cold, something sharp. You did great in there, he continued. Really, your groundwork made it easier for me to build on it. There it was. Not even denial, not even guilt, just quiet, confident ownership. I leaned back in my chair, studying him, really studying him for the first time, and suddenly everything made sense. The late nights he happened to stay, the questions he casually asked, the files he offered to review, the access I gave him. He didn't just steal my promotion. He stole my work, my time, my trust, 6 years of my life. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't bad luck. This was planned, calculated, executed perfectly. Mark smiled one last time. I hope this doesn't affect our working relationship. I smiled back, calm, controlled, unrecognizable. Of course not, I said, and I meant it, because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. I was thinking about something far more dangerous. Patience. Because if Mark Reynolds thought this was the end of the story, he had no idea what he had just started. The next morning, everything looked the same. And that was the most dangerous part. The same glass walls reflecting ambition. The same polished floors echoing hurried footsteps. The same artificial smiles exchanged between people who would replace each other without hesitation. Harrington and company hadn't changed overnight, but I had. I walked into the building with a calmness that didn't belong to me a week ago. No tightness in my chest. No restless thoughts racing ahead of me. Just silence. Controlled, deliberate silence. Because anger is loud. But strategy? Strategy is quiet. Mark's promotion had already taken effect. His name was on the new office. Corner glass, city view, the kind of space that made power feel tangible. People were already adjusting to it, congratulating him, laughing a little louder at his jokes, standing a little straighter when he walked by. I noticed everything, not because I cared, but because I needed to understand the battlefield. Hey, Sarah whispered as I settled at my desk. I'm so sorry about yesterday. Sarah had always been kind, one of the few people in the office who hadn't learned to wear a mask full time. I gave her a small smile. It's fine. She frowned slightly. It's not fine. Everyone knows that was your work. Everyone knows. But no one said anything. Of course they didn't. Because in this place, truth didn't matter. Power did. That was the moment my plan began. Not with confrontation. Not with anger, but with acceptance. I opened my laptop and pulled up my project files. Every document, every draft, every email thread. 6 years had taught me one thing very well. Always leave a trail. And Mark had made one mistake. He underestimated how careful I was. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Proof? Maybe. Closure? Definitely not. But as I scrolled through months of work, something became clear. There were timestamps, version histories, email attachments, moments where ideas existed before Mark ever spoke them out loud. Small things. But small things, when combined correctly, become weapons. Still digging into that project? I looked up. Mark, standing beside my desk like he belonged everywhere now. I leaned back slightly, just wrapping things up. He nodded, hands casually in his pockets. Good. We might need to revisit some of those ideas later. I almost smiled. You mean your ideas? For a split second, something flickered in his eyes, gone just as quickly as it appeared. Of course, he said smoothly. Team effort, right? Team effort. I nodded slowly. Right. That was when I knew he wasn't afraid. Not yet, which meant I had time. The next few days were educational. I stopped trying to prove myself, stopped volunteering ideas in meetings, stopped being visible. And something interesting happened. People stopped noticing me. It was like I had become invisible overnight, and invisibility is a powerful advantage. From the outside, it looked like I had accepted defeat, like I was another corporate casualty, quietly fading into the background. But in reality, I was watching, listening, collecting. Mark, on the other hand, was thriving, or at least, he looked like he was. His first major presentation as director was scheduled for Friday. A big one. Board members, external investors, high stakes, the kind of meeting that could define his entire career trajectory. And the irony? He was using my strategy, expanded, enhanced, but still mine at its core. I sat in the back of the conference room that day, unnoticed. The lights dimmed slightly as Mark stood at the front, confident as ever. Let's talk about the future, he began. I almost laughed, because I already knew how this story ended. He just didn't. The presentation started strong. Smooth delivery, clear structure, confident tone. The board members were engaged, nodding, taking notes. Everything was going perfectly, until the questions began. What about the risk exposure in Phase 3? Mark paused, just for a second, but I saw it. That tiny crack. Well, he said, adjusting slightly, we've accounted for most variables. Most? One of the board members interrupted. Silence. Because that part, the detailed risk mitigation plan, that was something I had developed separately. Something Mark had never fully understood. Something he had overlooked. I leaned back in my chair, watching carefully. He tried to recover, tried to improvise. But the more he spoke, the clearer it became. He didn't know the depth behind the strategy. He only knew the surface. And surfaces? They don't hold under pressure. The room shifted, subtly, but noticeably. Confidence turned into skepticism. Interest turned into doubt. By the time the presentation ended, the damage was done. It wasn't a disaster. Not yet, but it wasn't perfect anymore either. And in this world, perfect is the only thing that matters. After the meeting, whispers started. Quiet, controlled, professional. But they were there. Something felt off. He didn't seem fully prepared. I thought this was his project. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because seeds of doubt had been planted. And doubt grows on its own. That evening I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The office at night felt different. Honest. No masks. No performances. Just the quiet hum of machines and the truth people leave behind. I walked past Mark's office. The door was slightly open. Lights still on. And there he was, sitting at his desk, tie loosened, expression tense, scrolling through files, looking for something. For a moment, I just stood there, watching, not with anger, not with hatred, but with clarity, because now he was starting to feel it, the pressure, the uncertainty, the fear of being exposed. I knocked lightly on the door. He looked up quickly, surprised. "Oh, hey," he said, straightening slightly. "Working late?" I nodded. "Yeah, you?" He forced a small smile. "You know how it is." I stepped inside slowly. Calm, measured, big presentation today. I said, "Yeah," he exhaled. "Could have gone better." Could have gone better. That was an understatement. I tilted my head slightly. Strange. He frowned. "What is?" I held his gaze. Because when I built that strategy, it worked perfectly. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. For the first time, Mark Reynolds didn't have a response. And in that silence, something shifted. Not in the room, but inside him. Doubt. I gave him a small, polite smile. "Good night, Mark," and I walked away. That night, for the first time since the promotion, I slept peacefully, because the game had officially begun. And Mark, he had just realized he wasn't in control anymore. By the time Monday arrived, the office had already begun to shift in ways most people couldn't see, but I could feel it in every glance, every pause in conversation, every carefully chosen word people use around Mark. Doubt had entered the room, and once it settles in, it doesn't leave quietly. It lingers. It spreads. It waits for proof. And I was about to give it exactly that. I walked into Harrington and Company earlier than usual that day. The sky outside still dim, the city barely awake. The building felt hollow at that hour, like a body without a pulse. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was useful. I moved through the office with purpose, my heels echoing softly against the polished floors. Each step reminded me that I wasn't here to reclaim what was mine anymore. I was here to take something bigger. Control. I reached my desk and opened my laptop, the soft glow of the screen lighting up the darkness around me. Files, emails, logs. Over the past few days, I had done more than just observe. I had built a map, a precise, undeniable timeline of everything Mark had touched, accessed, copied, and presented as his own. At first, it had been messy, scattered pieces of information that didn't seem powerful on their own. But when arranged carefully, when aligned just right, they told a story no one could ignore. A story of theft, a story of deception, a story that could destroy a career. But I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. Not until the fall would hurt the most. Mark arrived later than usual. That was the first sign. He was always early before, always composed, always ahead. But now there was a delay, a hesitation, a crack in the routine that once defined him. When he walked in, he looked different, not broken, not yet, but distracted. His usual confidence had a slight delay, like a performance that needed rehearsal. "Morning," he said as he passed my desk. I looked up briefly and gave a small nod. Morning. That was all. No tension, no confrontation. And that unsettled him more than anger ever could. Over the next few days, I started laying the groundwork for the next phase, not by attacking Mark directly, but by guiding him exactly where I wanted him to go. People think revenge is about striking hard and fast. It's not. It's about positioning. I began feeding him information, subtle at first, ideas casually mentioned in passing, small insights dropped into conversations. Half-finished strategies that sounded promising but lacked depth. And just like before, he took them. Of course he did, because that's who he was. He didn't create. He consumed. "You had some interesting thoughts last week," he said one afternoon, leaning casually against my desk again, trying to regain that old confidence, about expanding into new markets. I looked at him like I had to think about it. "Oh, that?" I shrugged lightly. "Just a rough idea." He nodded, pretending it was nothing. But I saw it, the way he filed it away, the way his mind worked. Taking, always taking. What he didn't realize was that this time I wanted him to, because this time, every idea I gave him was incomplete, flawed, dangerous in ways that only someone who understood the full picture could detect. By Thursday, he had already started incorporating those ideas into his next proposal, faster than I expected. Desperate, that was the second sign. The office buzzed with anticipation again. Another major presentation. Another opportunity for Mark to prove himself after last week's performance. Only this time, the stakes were even higher. Because this wasn't just internal. This involved external partners. Real money, real consequences. I sat in the same spot during the presentation, the back of the room, invisible, watching everything unfold exactly as planned. Mark started strong again. He always did. Confident tone. Controlled body language. Just enough charm to keep people engaged. But beneath it, I could see the cracks. And by entering this market segment aggressively, we can secure early dominance, he explained, pointing to a slide. A slide I had helped design. A strategy one had guided. A trap he had walked into willingly. One of the partners leaned forward slightly. What about regulatory risks in that region? There it was, the first trigger. Mark hesitated, just slightly. But this time, it lasted longer. Well, he began, we've analyzed the primary concerns and... Primary concerns? The partner interrupted. Because from what I understand, there are significant compliance barriers. Silence, because the rough idea I'd given him left that part out. On purpose. I watched as Mark tried to recover, flipping through slides that suddenly didn't have the answers he needed. His voice remained steady, but his eyes betrayed him, searching, calculating, panicking just beneath the surface. And then came the second question, sharper, more direct. If this fails, another partner said, what's the contingency plan? There wasn't one, not a real one, because I never gave him that piece. The room changed instantly, not dramatically, but enough. Confidence turned into concern. Interest turned into caution. And this time, there was no smooth recovery. By the end of the meeting, the outcome was clear. No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. Mark hadn't just stumbled. He had exposed himself. The whispers returned. Louder now. More frequent. Less forgiving. He's rushing things. Does he actually understand strategy? This doesn't feel consistent. And the most dangerous one of all, was the previous success even his? That question, that was the beginning of the end. Later that evening, I found him in his office again. But this time, he wasn't just tense. He was unraveling. His desk was messy, files scattered, laptop open with multiple tabs, emails half-written, deleted, rewritten. He looked up when I knocked, and for the first time, there was no confidence in his eyes, only frustration, and something else, fear. What do you want? He asked, sharper than usual. I stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind me. I thought you might need help, I said calmly. He let out a dry laugh. Help. I nodded. You seem overwhelmed. His jaw tightened. I've got it under control. I tilted my head slightly. Do you? Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I walk a little closer, my voice still calm, almost gentle. You know what your problem is, Mark? He didn't respond. Didn't look away either. You skipped the foundation, I continued. You take the surface and hope it holds. I paused, letting the words sink in, but eventually it collapses. For a moment, I thought he might snap. His hands clenched slightly. His expression darkened, but instead, he looked away. And that's when I knew he was breaking. I gave him a small, almost sympathetic smile. If you ever want to actually understand the work, I said softly, you know where to find me. And then I turned and walked out. I didn't need to say anything else, because the truth had already started doing its job. That night, as I reviewed everything one last time, I realized something important. This was no longer just about exposing Mark. This was about timing, precision, impact, because I now had everything I needed. Evidence of the past, control over present, and a clear path to the future. All that was left was a final move, and when it came, it wouldn't just damage his reputation. It would erase it. By the time the final meeting was announced, the entire office could feel it. Not excitement, not anticipation. Something heavier, like the air before a storm breaks. The email came late Friday evening. Mandatory attendance. Full executive board. External stakeholders dialed in. A strategic alignment session led by Mark Reynolds. But I knew what it really was. This was his last chance. His last opportunity to prove he belonged in that chair. And he was going to walk straight into it. Exactly the way I wanted. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. Most people would have used that time to relax, disconnect, forget about work. I didn't. I spent those 2 days finalizing everything. Every document, every timestamp, every version history, every email where my ideas existed before his voice ever spoke them out loud. I didn't just organize the evidence. I refined it, turned it into a narrative so clear, so undeniable, that even the people who wanted to ignore it wouldn't be able to, because the truth, when presented correctly, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. Monday morning arrived with a strange stillness. The office was quieter than usual. Conversations were shorter. Smiles were thinner. Even the usual office noise felt restrained. People sensed something. They didn't know what, but they felt it. Mark arrived early again, trying to reclaim control, trying to look like the version of himself that had walked into that promotion with confidence. But it wasn't the same. I saw it the moment he stepped out of the elevator. The slight hesitation in his stride. The way his eyes scanned the room, not with authority, but with awareness, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. Good. The conference room filled quickly. Executives, managers, board members. Even people who didn't usually attend these meetings had shown up, because rumors had spread, and people are always drawing attention. I took my usual seat at the back, invisible, exactly where I needed to be. Mark stood at the front, adjusting his tie slightly as he prepared to begin. For a moment, everything felt still. Then, "Let's get started," he said. The presentation began, and for the first few minutes, it was perfect, clear structure, confident delivery, strong opening. He had prepared, worked harder than before, tried to fix the cracks. But the problem with cracks is, once they exist, they never fully disappear. About 15 minutes in, he reached the core strategy, the same one, the one built on everything he had taken, everything he never truly understood. That was my cue. I stood up. The sound of my chair moving was subtle, but in that quiet room, it was enough. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Mark stopped mid-sentence. For the first time, all eyes weren't on him. They were on me. "I think there's something important we should clarify," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake, didn't hesitate, didn't ask for permission. Mark's expression tightened instantly. "This isn't the time." "I think it is," I interrupted, still calm, still controlled. The room shifted. Confusion, curiosity, interest. Richard leaned forward slightly. "Go on." That was all I needed. I connected my laptop to the main screen. The presentation flickered for a second, then changed. Slide 1. Simple, clean, undeniable. A timeline. "This," I said, "is the development history of the strategy currently being presented." Silence. I clicked to the next slide. Email timestamps. My name. Dates. Attachments. Initial concept. I continued. Created 6 months ago. Another slide. Version history. Detailed edits. Progression. Expanded framework. I said 3 months ago. Another. Shared documents. Access logs. Mark's name appearing later. Much later. "And this," I said, looking directly at him now, "is when Mark first accessed these files." The room went completely still. No whispers. No movement. Just silence. Because now, they weren't listening. They were seeing. Mark stepped forward slightly. "This is being taken out of context." "Is it?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. I clicked again. Side-by-side comparison. My original work. His presentation. Identical structures. Identical phrasing. Identical strategy. The only difference? The name attached to it. "This isn't collaboration," I said quietly. The words weren't loud, but they hit harder than anything else. "This is replication." A murmur spread across the room. Low, controlled, but growing. Mark's composure cracked. "Not completely, but enough." "You're implying something serious," he said, his voice tighter now. "I'm not implying anything," I replied. "I'm showing it." I turned back to the screen. Final slide. A complete breakdown. Every idea, every origin point, every instance where my work existed before his. No gaps, no assumptions, no room for interpretation. Just truth. Richard stood up slowly. And that was the moment everything changed. "Is this accurate?" he asked, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because there was nothing to say. Silence stretched. Heavy, unforgiving. "I asked you a question," Richard repeated. Mark swallowed. It was a team effort." "No." Richard cut him off sharply. "It wasn't. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls were closing in. I stepped back from the screen. My part was done, because this was no longer about me. This was about consequences. Within minutes, the meeting was over. Abruptly, uncomfortably, Mark was asked to stay. Everyone else was dismissed. As I walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I already knew what was happening behind those closed doors. Questions, pressure, realization, the beginning of the end. The office exploded with whispers the moment the doors closed. People weren't even pretending anymore. Did you see that? I can't believe it. He's done. But I didn't stop, didn't engage, didn't react. I walked back to my desk, sat down, opened my laptop, and for the first time in weeks, there was nothing left to do. Hours later, the email came. Short, direct, final. Effective immediately, Mark Reynolds is relieved of his duties pending further investigation. Pending investigation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, not smiling, not celebrating, because this wasn't victory. Not yet. This was just the fall. And the fall was only the beginning. The office didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a crime scene. The morning after the email, Harrington and company was quieter than I had ever experienced it. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. Not the focused, productive silence of people deep in work. This was different. This was the kind of silence people carry when they've just witnessed something they can't unsee. Mark's office was empty. The glass walls that once framed his confidence now reflected nothing but absence. The desk had been cleared overnight. No laptop, no files, no sign that anyone had ever built a future there. It was unsettling. How quickly someone could disappear. How easily a career could be erased. People tried not to stare, but they did, at the office, at me, at the space where everything had happened. Whispers still moved through the air, softer now, more careful, because the story had changed. At first, it was about Mark. Now, it was about me. I could feel in the way conversations stopped when I walked past, in the way people chose their words more carefully, in the way respect, real respect, had replaced the polite acknowledgement I used to get, not because I had won, but because I had proven something. I wasn't invisible anymore. Hey! I looked up to see Sarah standing beside my desk again, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. I don't even know what to say, she admitted. That was intense. I gave a small, quiet nod. Yeah. She hesitated. Are you okay? That question lingered longer than I expected. Was I okay? I had imagined this moment so many times. The exposure, the truth coming out, the look on Mark's face when everything collapsed. I thought it would feel like victory, closure, satisfaction. But standing there in the aftermath of it all, what I felt wasn't any of those things. I think I am, I said finally, and for the first time, I meant it. The investigation didn't take long. It didn't need to. What I had presented wasn't just convincing. It was undeniable. Within 3 days, another email arrived. This one longer, more formal, more final. Following a thorough internal review, we have concluded that Mark Reynolds engaged in professional misconduct, including misrepresentation of work and breach of company ethics. The words were cold, precise, permanent. His employment has been terminated effective immediately. Just like that, it was over. No dramatic exit. No final speech. No chance for redemption. Just gone. But consequences don't stop at termination. Not in this world. Reputation travels faster than truth. And in Mark's case, the truth had arrived first. By the end of the week, word had spread beyond the company. Quietly, professionally, but thoroughly, opportunities disappeared. Connections went silent. Doors that had once opened easily stayed closed, because in industries like this, trust isn't just important. It's everything. And once it's broken, it doesn't come back. I didn't follow what happened to him after that, not actively, but I heard things. Fragments, pieces, consulting offers withdrawn, interviews canceled, references questioned. A career doesn't always end with a single moment. Sometimes It unravels slowly. And that's exactly what happened to Mark Reynolds. A week later, I was called into Richard's office. The same office that had once felt intimidating. The same space where decisions were made without emotion. But this time, it felt different. "Sit," he said. I did. For a moment, he didn't speak, just studied me, like he was trying to understand something he had missed before. "You handled that professionally," he said finally. I nodded slightly. I presented facts. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "And you waited?" That wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Why?" I thought about that for a second. Not the strategic answer. The real one. "Because timing matters," I said quietly. "And because I needed the truth to be undeniable." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "You should have had that position," he said. Simple, direct, late, but I didn't react. Because by now, I understood something important. Validation, when it comes too late, doesn't carry the same weight. "We'd like to correct that," he continued. There it was, the offer, the thing I had worked 6 years for, the thing I had lost, the thing I had fought to prove I deserved. Director of Strategic Operations. For a moment, everything stood still. This was supposed to be the ending, the moment where everything comes full circle, the reward, the recognition, the victory. But instead, I felt something unexpected. Distance. I looked around the office, at the polished surfaces, the carefully curated power, the system that had allowed everything to happen in the first place. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. This place hadn't just tested me. It had changed me. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "But then, I'm going to decline." Silence. Richard frowned slightly. "Decline." I nodded. "I didn't do all of this just to step into the same system that ignored it," I said calmly. That was the truth, the real truth, because this was never just about the promotion. It was about respect, ownership, control, and I had already taken that back. "I've accepted another offer," I added. Not entirely true yet, but it would be, because now I had something more valuable than a title. I had leverage, reputation, proof of who I was, and what I was capable of. Richard studied me again, longer this time. Then slowly, he nodded. "Fair enough." I stood up, turned, and walked out of that office for the last time. No anger, no regret, no unfinished business, just clarity. A few weeks later, I found myself standing in a completely different building, different city, different energy, different future. The air felt lighter, the possibilities wider. And as I stepped into my new office, smaller, simpler, but mine in a way Harrington and Company had never been, I realized something. Mark didn't just lose his career. He gave me mine. Not the one I thought I wanted, the one I actually deserved. Because in the end, this was never a story about revenge. It was a story about control, about knowing your worth, about understanding that sometimes the greatest victory isn't taking something back. It's choosing something better. And as I sat down, looking out at a future I had built on my own terms, I smiled, not because I had destroyed someone else, but because no one could ever take what was mine again.